Nicole. So happy you joined us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so are we. Perhaps an obvious one to start with. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, about Buffer and your role at Buffer.
Yeah, definitely. So Buffer is a social media platform that is designed to help small businesses market online. And we are almost 90 individuals and we're completely globally distributed. And we've been fully remote for the last 8-ish years. We ditched our office in 2015. And so all of us are very used to this sort of remote first mentality. And we've always also tried to be a very culture and values focused company. So that has led us to do all sorts of fun things. And we're also very grounded in the value of transparency. And so we also share all of our journey and experiments online on our open blog at open.buffer.com. So that's where you can always learn more about us.
Super cool. Thank you for that, Nicole. And great to have you on the podcast. Great to have to hear more about Buffer and what an innovative company you are. And today on the podcast, as we mentioned, we are talking about productivity, but we wanted to dive in to specifically what's been happening at Buffer. And we understand that recently you went to a 4-day work week.
Yes,
Amazing.
we did.
That's cool. I guess my first question around that, there's so many questions that come up when you talk about 4-day work week, because it's something you hear about and you're like, that actually sounds really cool. But if I can just start with the first question, it would be, what was Buffer's motivation for going to that 4-day work week?
Yeah, so we have toyed with the idea of a 4-day work week for a long time because it's something that has come up again and again, especially in the tech sector, and different countries and different companies have experimented with it. We saw a couple articles in 2019 about it. And so we did a really light test of it in 2019 in August, and we called it Summer Fridays. And it was essentially just half of a day off at the end of the week. And it felt okay, but it didn't feel super successful as an experiment. And so it was something we said, oh, we tried that. That's fun. Let's move on. And then once the pandemic hit in early 2020, around April, we realized that we needed to do some other things to support our teammates. And so we didn't really know exactly what would help. And so we did a lot of team surveys and a lot of discussions with teammates. And one of the areas we really focused on was how we can best support parents, because parents who had kids that, the schools were shut down, suddenly had kids at home. And while we were all used to working remotely when the pandemic hit, all of our routines at that point were a little bit upended once the kids were home or they didn't have daycare options anymore. And so we asked, and what we expected was sort of like maybe more of a stipend, or, even if it was just sending iPads to kids to help keep them entertained. But overwhelmingly, our parents responded, and even those who didn't have little kids at home responded with what they wanted or needed more was flexibility and more time offline to sort of attend to everything from grocery shopping, which took a little bit longer, to helping homeschool their children or whatever that was. And that's when the idea resurged about a 4-day work week, because already productivity was a little bit down, morale was very much down, and we saw this as a way to help give our teammates a little bit more time and hopefully help with the stress that came from all these external factors. And so we launched it as a 30-day, 1-month experiment in May, and found it was very helpful. But the pandemic obviously wasn't over. And so we extended it a little bit more. And midway through June, we realized that we needed to make a longer term decision about it. And yet when we looked back at the last month and a half, we saw that it hadn't made a huge dent in the productivity we'd been seeing before. And so that's when the idea came for us to do a 6-month trial. And that's when we really dove in and we said, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to monitor what our productivity looks like.
Thank you. Super interesting. We'll talk about indeed how you measured the productivity, or you saw a little bit of a dent, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. What I was curious about first is, since this podcast is called The Ins and Outs of Work, and we try to look at things a bit from an HR perspective, but also from an outside of HR perspective. But my job is to be more focused on the HR side of things. What role did HR play in creating perhaps a framework for this 4-day work week? So I heard you mention a survey that came back with answers. I heard you mention a 6-month trial after the initial trial. What can you tell us about HR's role in this?
Yeah, so we, from the HR perspective and people team perspective, we did a lot of the engagement surveys, and we always do a lot of surveys throughout the year. We do, the weekly pulse surveys that are a little bit lighter. We do twice a year really in-depth engagement surveys, and we ran some of the more specific surveys that came out from the different platforms around COVID-19 to understand the stresses and concerns there. And then from there, our people team really handled a lot of the internal communications around that, and assisted other areas with that. We also helped brainstorm and advise a little bit around how to implement this within specific areas. And I think we'll touch on this a little bit more too, with like exactly what that looks like for customer support. Because we obviously don't want to have customers having a very negative experience because we're choosing to work one less day a week. And so from an HR lens, that came into play as well, was also making sure that this was applied fairly amongst the whole team. And we weren't saying that this benefit was available to engineers, but not advocates or customer support teams. So we really tried to look at the whole program. And then we also were in charge of monitoring how we would evaluate the productivity from each different area. And also then like how we would make that call going forward at the end of 2020, at the end of our 6-month trial. So, we looked at a lot of different things. There's always then those interesting considerations around, for us, luckily all of our teammates are paid salary. And so it wasn't necessarily something we had to worry about, anyone who is being paid hourly, which is helpful in this sort of a case. And then, after a 6-month trial and before we implemented it, in 2021, our role within the HR area was to really make sure that we were clear about the expectations and stipulations going forward, so that people know that we are expecting the same results, even though we're working shorter work weeks. And that might mean, the occasional half of a Friday being worked, or even just an hour on a Friday, or whatever that is. And then I guess the final piece would be encouraging flexibility within that. So we don't restrict people to only work Monday through Thursday. People can also do like a shorter work day overall and work 5 days, or they could do whatever works best for their family, especially those with, who maybe are balancing like younger kids at home.
It sounds like flexibility is the magic word here then, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think too, we've always had a very flexible schedule as a company, and this really put it into, a really firm foundation, and encouraged everyone to explore that for how they need it to be.
Great. Well, Nicole, we wanted to maybe just dive down into the practicalities for a moment with a bit of a rapid fire series of questions. So I've got 3 quick questions. You covered I think you covered a few of the answers there, but it's good to always, summarize a little bit. Also here, you may have a rooster in your home. Do you?
Yes, I do. I do. Not in my home. Sorry, the microphone maybe brings it in a little more. Good. He's in the backyard, but there's...
he didn't want to miss out on being on the podcast.
I always joke. This is why I like the 4-day work, is I have a small farm. So I have all the chores and chickens to tend and all that, which is why the 4-day work week flexibility really works for me. Yep.
You're there in the morning. So he's getting his singing done in the morning. We're here in the evening in Europe.
Yes.
The magic of the internet. Amazing. But no, I wanted to quickly run through these rapid fire questions. You covered, as I said, a bit of the answers already, but here we go. Okay, so did it mean that people were going to earn less money?
No.
No, it didn't. Second question, what does a 4-day work week look like for a department like customer service? You touched on it a little bit there.
Yes. So for them, it rotates. So we have everyone rotating so that we have a full 5-day coverage. We even have weekend coverage as well. So it just means that their day off isn't the same as necessarily everyone else in the company.
Right. And finally, quickfire question number 3 would be, what happens in busy periods? We can't, you got a 4-day work week, but what happens if there's a big project or there's a busy period?
Some people do work a little bit extra on that 5th day. It really does depend. And sometimes it's a little hard with spread out time zones. So we're keeping it flexible. We're keeping an eye on that to make sure we're not overworking anyone. But we try to hold on to that 4-day, 30-hour-a-week mentality.
Right. Okay, cool. Great to get some of the practicalities there. Just rapid fire.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Joe and Nicole. So we're back to a, let's say, more regular question now. And I wanted to touch a little bit on productivity in terms of measuring it, indeed, Nicole. So what can you tell us about this? Are there any specific metrics that you have been using, or are you still trying different things out? What is happening?
That's a great one. So in 2020, we used our customer, ticket response times and data that we track all year round, to help measure whether or not we were still getting to our customers in a timely manner. We looked at our customer happiness scores to make sure we were doing quality work still. So that definitely helped. And then on the engineering side, we used a tool, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the tool name itself, but it tracked the amount of code written or code pushed out onto the product. And that we saw, from we looked at like a month in time from like November 2019 to November 2020. And we showed that even though people spent less time coding overall, people actually increased the amount of time coding from 2019, where we didn't have a 4-day work week, to 2020. And so it showed that there was just more code actually produced, even though people were working a total of 4 days a week versus 5. So those were the best, objective numbers we had at that time. And then we did a lot of, the sort of qualitative, like, did you feel more productive? Which I know is very subjective. And people, of course, are going to say, yes, I felt more productive, because of course they want that 4-day work week. So everything, a little grain of salt there. But it was very cool to see. We did feel like people had a better balance of overall stress. We asked, the very early parts of these experiments, like what their stress level was on, a scale of 1 being great and 5 being bad. And the stress level actually did drop a little bit, which was good to see. And of course, there's always external factors, but we wanted to see a little bit better mental health balance there. So that was helpful to see. And then now one thing we do have new for 2021 is we are using Okrs when it comes to, objectives and key results, which is the model that Google uses and promotes to better judge whether or not we're achieving our more subjective goals. So we'll be starting to use those as a grading system, and really looking to see if we are able to hold to what we wanted to accomplish in Q1 with a 4-day work week.
Super interesting. Thanks, Nicole. The next kind of follow-up question I'd have to that is like, has this shift to a 4-day work week changed at all the way that you see productivity or define it at Buffer? I know already you guys were completely remote, but I get the sense from other companies that productivity sometimes is measured by, the hours you're putting in, the time in the office, being present, stuff like that. Do you have any reflections on how it might have changed your definition of productivity even?
Yeah, I think we've always really leaned toward being a results focused environment, which has helped with a lot of that flexibility and trust. So like if you're getting your work done, then you don't have to clock in a solid 8-hour day or clock out right at 5 o'clock. And so that's been really helpful overall in our history. And we have a very, a lot of people who are very comfortable doing the schedule they need and talking with their manager to make sure that that works for them. But the thing that this, I think, helped with was giving that sort of permission slip to the broader team and the broader company so that they knew that they could do the schedule they needed and work the hours they needed just to get the results accomplished. Another specific example around customer support is that we have defined kind of the exact number of tickets that meet like a 4-day work week, what a successful 4-day work week looks like. So once our support staff hits their target goals based on this matrix, they can feel like they can really disconnect and take off that Friday or whatever day it is for them that week. And so that's been helpful because that's, a very unique area. So for them, their work never ends and it's not a project that they can ship and launch and be done with, when there's always customer support tickets coming in. So that's been really helpful for us to really define it and give permission to do the hours you need to finish the project and to do it well.
Interesting. I'm sure that there are companies out there that are thinking as we speak about perhaps making the move, jump in and go to a 4-day work week. Now, as you've been trying this out for a while, Nicole, you've had some experience. What would you say to those companies? What are some key things to take into account if they are considering to shift from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week?
Yeah, I think there are a couple components. One is leadership buy-in. This was definitely driven by our CEO, and he found a lot of great results in his own workflow when it came to him working a 4-day work week. And so he was fully bought in and fully supportive and really wants us to be the future of work and the future of our company. And so for him, that all of that support really made the difference for us as a people team to implement this. And the other thing I would say is, that it doesn't necessarily mean this will work for everyone in every company. Like we believe in transparency and we have transparent salaries, but we also acknowledge that that doesn't necessarily mean it will work for every company in every sector. And so having the understanding that it can sort of, work in some instances, but not all of them is important. But I think the other thing, we went into this and we're sort of still in this mindset of this is an experiment and it can still go away at any time. If we see at the end of Q2 that we're not getting where we need to be with the product, then we will reevaluate at that point. So for companies who want to test it out, you could do a month trial. You could do once a month, a 4-day work week. The reality is we have a lot of public holidays in most every country. And so you kind of test out that 4-day work week mentality already with, trying to get your work done so that you can take that, that bank holiday off or whatever it is. So, expanding that and doing one Friday off a month, and just seeing how it goes. I think you'd see a huge morale boost already with just sort of that sort of an approach. So yeah, try it out, see what it is, know your objectives and know what you're going to measure so that you can compare. I think that's a really great place to start.
Cool. Thank you, Nicole. Now, people who regularly listen know that then I always, like to do a bit of a wrap up when there's this kind of list of points. So for companies considering to go to a 4-day work week, make sure you have buy-in from, for instance, the CEO. Start small, start perhaps with a trial, and also keep in mind that it might not be for every company. So back to you, Joe.
Yes. Thank you, Neely. Great getting the summary in there so we can remember those great points that Nicole made. But no, I like that point, Nicole, that it's not, sometimes you see these new trendy things like 4-day work week or even, before the pandemic, remote work was one of those things. And you kind of think, should we just be doing it because a lot of people are doing it? But I like your point in terms of it's not going to work for every company. You got to really understand what the implications are and think it through. And I love that trial mentality as well. It's like you don't have to decide once and for all that it's the thing. Like, that's cool. Kind of my next question, Nicole, was around the culture at Buffer. So what have you seen in terms of impacts on culture?
That's a great one. So I think for us, there's a couple things. The 4-day work week solidified how we want to be a little bit on the edge of that future of work mentality, and also that we, as a culture, trust our teammates to get their work done. So I feel like it shared some really great things with the team as far as like, we trust you and we want to try to work like this. And we really value that you have time off of work and that you disconnect fully, that you work hard, but also get to play hard. So for me, it really solidified those messages that we were already trying to communicate within our company. One thing I will say that has been a drawback that we're still trying to figure out is how we build in some of the flex time around doing casual chats within our areas or cross team events. So we did scale back a lot on some of the unnecessary or what felt like frivolous company events or individual team events. So there's a little bit less of the, almost happy hour type events, because 1 hour of your day in a 4-day work week is a lot more precious than it felt like it was before. And again, we wanted to really give this the best chance it had to succeed. And at the end of the day, that does come down to making sure we meet our productivity and business goals. And so then maybe, that chat about, a movie or something that feels more social gets cut. And so we are trying to figure out how to bring those back in so that we still have that sense of connection as a company and that we all know each other well. There are 2 things that we feel are really important culture initiatives that we made sure didn't get cut when we moved to a 4-day work week. And those 2 are what we call pair calls, which are 30-minute rotating casual chats with teammates where you get randomly assigned a teammate from any area or any department. And so then you do just a half an hour chat with them once a week. And then it changes the next week. And those have been really good. And a lot of people have reported those still feel really easy to do with a 4-day work week and that they don't detract too much from their overall work productivity. And the second one are called peer masterminds. And that's, where we pair someone with a long-term buddy and they're sort of that like work confidant and person that they can talk to about challenges and achievements. And that can be anyone across the whole company. And that is a more like long-term partnership and relationship. And those tend to be like a 1-hour meeting every other week, or sometimes weekly. So those have stayed around. And I do think that one-on-one time does pay off and allows for some of those deeper connections and relationships to be built.
I love how you still managed to indeed keep that 30 minutes time for people to still connect with other people within the organization, even though you're only doing a 4-day work week. Now, I have a bit of a practical question again, and it's a bit a continuation of the question about indeed, what do you do with the more social time that people have when they are at work? So what does it mean, for instance, for meetings? How are you doing this at Buffer? Do you have a day without any meetings for people, or do you have shorter meetings by as a standard? How are you doing? How are you dealing with this?
Yeah, that's a great one. We've always been a little bit meeting adverse. And so we tend to have kind of the bare minimum already. And we really lean into asynchronous communication because it's sometimes hard for an entire team to even meet together. So when we have a teammate in London and a teammate in Australia, there's not a lot of overlap that doesn't require someone to be up either really early or stay up really late. And so that does, present some challenges already. And we've really tried to work around that even well before the pandemic happened and well before the 4-day work week. So a lot of those asynchronous communication habits have really helped us with the 4-day work week. So I'd almost put that in as another aside as far as preparing for a 4-day work week. Make sure you have, as few meetings as possible and also a lot of informational structures to where you can communicate without having to be in person. So, an online tool or something that allows you to send updates or do something without having to be in person or have like an all hands or something if you can avoid those.
Right. I'm sure, like you were saying before, that the fact is that when you go to a 4-day work week, every hour and almost every minute counts for so much more. So those meetings or even like you were saying, those social times kind of need to be put into question a little bit sometimes. And no meetings about the next meeting or planning for the next meeting. But
Yes.
like you said, you guys went.
Or what could be an email.
Exactly.
Yep.
Very interesting. So kind of, I mean, you've really shared really honestly, Nicole, about this, which has been so cool in terms of some of the drawbacks and things already. But we kind of wanted to know if you had to summarize it, and if there was a company looking at really thinking about going to a 4-day work week, what is like the major pitfall that you would say, watch out for this when you give it a go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good one. I think I would say that the major pitfall really is not having an idea of how you're going to measure success. And so especially for something where, if you don't have a goal tracking system in place or like very clear deadlines around projects and things, make sure that you have an objective way to measure whether or not this is working, because I think people will want to know for their own, career progression. And then also too, you don't want the customers or your product or the company to suffer because of that change, because then everyone, will be a little either resentful and maybe never try a 4-day work week again, or, it then kind of maybe failed for a different reason than you might have expected. So having an idea of what you're going to use as a way to say this is a success or not is really helpful. And so then that's where I really do think the starting out small and measuring it and then scaling up can be really helpful, so that you don't, have a huge irreversible a drawback or something.
That's a good one.
That's what it's all about, really knowing what you're actually trying to achieve with it and then going into it with that in mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are getting towards the end of this conversation, which has been great so far already, Nicole. There's just one last thing that we wanted to touch on before we are going to really wrap up. And that is in terms of candidates that you are attracting at Buffer. I'm not sure if you can already say something about this, since it's all been relatively recent in terms of the move to the 4-day work week. But have you noticed that you are attracting a certain type of candidates? For instance, are you attracting mostly younger parents who are really drawn to this concept of 4-day work week, or is it people from younger generations in the workforce, or perhaps not at all and really changes? What can you tell us about this?
That's a great one. I don't have specific demographic data lately, but I do think already our culture and the way we worked was really set up for this, and who we attracted already. We want people who do feel aligned with our values and feel excited about the culture we've created. And we want people that we know we can trust and who are very independent and can work very efficiently. And so those are things we've already really screened for and really tried to attract with our hiring process. So yeah, I'm hoping to dig into that more, because I do think it does, the 4-day work week does really have an allure to it, because it does challenge a lot of that status quo. Like, why do we need to work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday? Especially in a knowledge-based industry like ours, where it's about creativity, which is very, a very finite resource. And working an extra 10 hours that week doesn't necessarily make your product better. It's about working smarter and being really considerate and working on the right things and prioritizing and being proactive. And so those types of people we feel we've always really tried to bring in and attract. And so yeah, I'm excited to see where it does keep going.
Well, maybe one final question, Nicole, and I think I'm springing this on you a little bit. But what we always like to do is leave our listeners with a little bit of a challenge. So if there's HR people out there, if there's managers out there listening into this episode, what's maybe taking it broader to productivity? What's a challenge that you would leave them with?
I would look at your own schedule and your own productivity, measure your own time and how you're using it and what example you're setting for your teammates, and maybe communicate that and say, hey, I figured out this productivity system for myself and it helped me reduce what I needed to spend on this one project, and I saved an hour. And then, depending on your relationship with your manager and with your employer, test out a slightly shorter work day or take a slightly longer lunch break and sort of understand what flexible work can mean to you. And again, just test out, are you delivering the same results? And are you able to work harder in that 1 hour and deliver a better thing than working the 2 hours that you otherwise would have spent on it? So I think it starts with, your own personal success and your own personal drive. And so if you can make that work and if you can be a champion of that idea within your company, I think you can drive bigger change and get that broader buy-in that you need.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
This has been such a great conversation indeed. So, Nicole, thank you so much for taking time out of your 4-day work week to speak with us. So we really appreciate it. I personally enjoyed it very much, but thank you so much.